Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Health Code podcast. Now, we've got an amazing guest coming up for you in a few minutes, but before we dive into that, as I said at the end of last week's episode, the first part here, we're going to talk about nutrition, because nutrition is really where it all starts. It's the principle of having a lovely car and putting vegetable oil in it rather than petrol. Well, it might look great, or it might have all this potential, but it's not going to perform very well unless you put the right fuel into it. Our bodies are no different. Our bodies are exactly the same. What you put in directly relates to what you get out. You put really good stuff in, invariably, unless you're very unlucky, you're going to get good stuff out. You put bad stuff in, you're going to get bad stuff out in the sense of how you feel, in the sense of health problems, in the sense of probably your aesthetic appearance. So, we live in a world now where because of social media, because of clickbait, because of people trying to get attention, there is extremes when it comes to pretty much every single subject. And nutrition and diet and lifestyle when it comes to what you eat, honestly, that is one of the most polarized and extreme things you can even comprehend and think of the competition. You've got people on one end of the spectrum who say all you need is red meat, you don't need to eat anything else. You've got people on the other end of the spectrum that say all you need to eat is a plant-based diet and you don't need anything else. Now, I don't subscribe to the concept, based on the research I've done, that there is one diet that suits every man, woman and child. I don't believe that's the fact. That's the truth. I believe there probably is as many diets and as many right diets out there as there is people on this earth. I think so many things contribute, so many factors contribute to what makes a good diet for you. Where you're born in the world, your genetics, your skin color, the culture, the temperature of the place that you live or are born in, the climate, the lifestyle, so many different things, so many different factors down to your genetics, as many different factors as you want to name. Hence why you've got people in certain parts of the world that are thriving, living a very plant-based, low-protein diet, namely the blue zones down in Sardinia, where they have a very fresh diet of seafood, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, healthy fats like olive oil, and so on. And then you've got this brand new high-protein, high-fat, keto, carnivore, paleo type diets that are supposedly the pinnacle, and there's lots of people doing them that are thriving. There's lots of people that have a vegan diet that seem to be thriving. So I don't believe there's one diet that fits all, but I do believe that there is one key component that you can apply to any diet, whichever one you are doing, which is that you want the freshest and you want the highest quality ingredients that you can possibly get. If you're on a plant-based diet and you're eating tons of synthetic, fake meats, not natural products based on chemical concoctions, namely corn and lots of the vegetarian and vegan sausages and meat replacements and so on, I don't believe that's healthy. If you're eating fresh fruits and fresh vegetables from your local area, I absolutely believe that can be a healthy diet. Similar goes to the other end of the spectrum with carnivore. If you're eating very toxic, low-quality meat that's been pumped full of growth hormones and antibiotics and bovine and so on, pasteurized dairy, then I don't believe that's good. If you're eating fresh, grass-fed meats, pasture-raised eggs, high-quality dairy, raw milks and so on, then I think, again, there's a lot of health benefits to that. I've tried pretty much every diet, namely because I'm interested in how my body responded to different diets, and I'm also always on the lookout to feel better, to feel stronger, fitter, leaner, and more vibrant. So therefore, I've still not reached the point where I think I found the perfect diet for myself. I think I'm always trying to evolve and tweak that. Unfortunately, that's not the case for most people. Most people settle into a certain diet, and as we said in last week's episode, they've accepted a life where 6 out of 10 is good enough. They might feel achy, they might feel tired, but they just kind of get on with it. They accept that's how it is, rather than constantly trying to evolve and improve and feel better. For me, that's our duty. Our duty is that every single one of us have a purpose, we have a passion, we have a gift to bring to the world, and I think it's our life's mission to figure out what that is and to bring it to the world. That's our responsibility in this human family. And I think it should be every person's individual responsibility to have themselves feeling the most vibrant, best version of themselves, whatever that looks like to you. So what I want to share with you today is something that I think is incredibly useful to figuring out where you might be going wrong with your diet, figuring out what foods tend to upset you, and figuring out what foods make you feel good, make you feel thriving, whether that's cognitively or physically in terms of your energy, your sleep, your presence in the room. So people talk about food diaries. They talk about keeping tabs on what you eat. They use different apps, MyFitnessPal, My Net Diary, and others to track their calories, their breakdowns of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and things like that. Now, for me, that's kind of stage 2. Step 1 is even more simple than that. What I would urge everybody to do, if you're struggling with your diet where you don't feel great, maybe you're struggling with your weight, maybe you feel very tired and lethargic after eating, maybe you're having issues with digestion where you feel full for hours and then all of a sudden you feel very, very hungry, uncomfortably so, when you feel sluggish when you get up in the morning, all of those are signs that your body's not getting something that it needs, or it's getting too much of something that it doesn't want. So what I would suggest we do firstly, buy yourself a notebook, really simple, smallest one you can get, a little pocket notebook, and put down in there your meals for the day. So say you're doing breakfast, lunch and dinner, as most people would do. What I want you to do is I want you to write the ingredients that were in that food. So hypothetically, to keep it really simple, let's say you had beans on toast. You write down that you had beans, you write down that you had toast, and you ideally, if you want to go really into it, you put the brand of whatever it is that you've had. And then I want you to write down how you felt 10 minutes after eating your meal, and I want you to write down how you felt an hour after having your meal. Keep it as simple as you want. Smiley face if you felt good, grumpy face if you didn't, something in the middle if you felt okay. If you want to keep it as basic as that, do that. Then the same for your next meal, the same for your next meal. And then the next day, the start of day 2 on this, I want you to put how you felt at the start of the day. Did you wake up feeling energized? Did you wake up feeling tired? How did you sleep? And then do the same for day 2 with all your meals. Same for day 3. Each morning, the same principle. How did you sleep? How did you feel when you woke up? Do that for 7 days. And after 7 days, I want you to take a blank sheet of paper and I want you to look at all the foods that you have described, that you have eaten, and see if there's any themes. Right. Beans on toast, to keep it simple. I had beans on toast 3 times last week. And each time afterwards, within 10 minutes and within an hour, felt bloated. Felt quite lethargic. Okay. 3 times I had that, I felt that way. So you've got 2 elements to that. It could be toast, so it could be bread, or it could be beans. I also want you to describe any foods that you ate that you felt great afterwards. And that's quite common. Certain foods will make you feel high energy. Maybe you did a workout after a certain meal, after your lunch, and you felt really strong. You felt really fit when you did that. You felt really vibrant. Maybe you felt great when you went to bed after your dinner. And I want you to look at all those foods that you have had that made you feel good and write those down as well. And the really simple equation then is you have more of the ones that made you feel good and you have less of the ones that didn't. And you start by doing this to understand exactly what food your body doesn't want, exactly how certain foods make you feel. And it's about being more present with your body. Now, people will argue and say that sounds very hippie. It's not. You live inside your body. You're in here at all times with your own emotions, your own thoughts, your own physical health when it comes to whether you feel tired, lethargic, achy. So isn't it a good idea to connect with it so that you're in tune and you can start to understand it? You can start to go, that doesn't sound quite right. To bring it back simply to the car concept, when you're driving your car, if your car starts making a rattling noise it wasn't making 5 miles ago, you're going to notice and you're going to be like, something's not right, something's changed. If all of a sudden it starts shuddering when it wasn't before, you're going to start to evaluate, well, what's causing that? Our bodies need to be treated in exactly the same way. If your body's starting to feel something that it wasn't yesterday, that's it sending you a message that something's out of balance. And the best way to try and understand how to bring it back into balance is to listen to it. And our food is so important. We have 3 meals or 2 meals a day. Every single day, every single time you open your mouth and put food into your body, you're making a decision whether you're doing something for the benefit of your health or for the detriment. Occasionally it'll be somewhere in the middle, but most of the time it's one or the other. And by listening to how our body feels after certain foods, good or bad, we can start to reconnect and start to really understand exactly what our body wants from our diet. That's step 1. Start doing that. Do that for a week. Based on the feedback you get from that first week, live your second week slightly differently and see if you feel different. And then just keep doing that until you get to a point you'll have a list of ingredients that your body responds very well to, and you'll have figured out exactly what it doesn't respond very well to, and you can start to limit those or completely cut those out of your diet. Very simple concept, but incredibly effective when it comes to looking at why you feel a certain way after eating, or why you may feel a certain way if you're not getting something from your diet that your body needs. Hope you found that helpful. I've been doing that. I still do that now, and I find it incredibly helpful. And I sometimes will go back and periodically review things that I've written about previously, things that I've tried or maybe not had a great response to. Maybe after a period of time, I might try it again to see if I feel the same, because there's so many things that go into a healthy diet. And ultimately, you've got to figure out what is healthy and beneficial for you. What works for you might not work for me, might not work for your partner, might not work for your kids. But you've got to figure out what works for you, because at the end of the day, it's your body, it's your health. So therefore, you need to put that at the top of your list of priorities, and everything and everyone around you will benefit if you're feeling the best version of yourself. So hopefully you give that a go. And I'd love to hear some feedback in the comments if any of you try that. And hopefully it does what it's intended to do and helps you improve your health. Right, well, enough of me. Moving on to our guest, Catherine Edwards is joining us again. She was on here with during the first season. We had a fascinating chat about a number of different things. I want to talk to her tonight about, again, a number of different things, but I really want to talk to her about animals. Now, Catherine is a fantastic nutritionist, a fantastic holistic practitioner across many areas, and she does specialise in working with animals. I've been to her house and she's got so many animals, it's absolutely incredible. And she's such a fascinating lady. And we're going to talk about a few things related to how animals can teach us a lot more than we give them credit for, how they're so intuitive. We're going to talk about the type of things they do with their diet and their health that we can definitely learn from. And we're also going to talk about nutrition in human beings and how we can work together to improve the health of everyone collectively, which is no bad thing. So let's dive in. Right, I'm delighted to welcome back Catherine Edwards to Health Code, start of this next series. We had a fantastic conversation during the last one, which got some incredible feedback, and I'm looking forward to discussing more with her today. But Catherine, how are you firstly?
I'm pretty good. I'm a bit up and down, probably like everyone. You know, I went to a fantastic in-person event this week, and it really reminded me of how important that personal connection is. Getting outside a lot with my animals, so that keeps me sort of balanced when you're reading and seeing so much disruption going on.
Yeah, I'm with you, completely with you. Although hopefully not going outside too much, because there is a Met Office warning this week that if you get outside in the sun too much this week in this heat, it's very detrimental to your health.
It's hysterical, and yet us Brits are out there saying, "Give me sun, give me sun."
Oh yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
I can't wait. It's been, to be fair, given in this country, I made a point in the podcast this morning. In this country, we moan about the weather probably more than anywhere else in the world. We moan it's too hot, too cold, too windy, not windy enough, no snow, too much snow, all of that. We've had a pretty good summer, to be fair, so far. We've had some nice weather, and I don't know about you, but I've really felt the difference in, waking up when it's nice and light in the mornings. You get outside in the sun, get a bit of a workout or a walk in the evening when it's still nice and bright and warm. You just feel so much better, don't you?
It's such an important point. And one, you feel massively better. And I notice it in the animals a lot as well. And I've been doing loads of research, like I think so many people are, about how important getting that full spectrum UV light is into your eyes morning and evening. So sunrise and sunset. And the difference is literally day and night, excuse the pun, because when we work with our biology, our natural biological rhythms, and get away from these computer screens that we're all spending far too much time on, the power of the mind and body to rebalance themselves and to get some perspective over what's going on in the world. And I think, you talk so much with your lovely team about getting out of this fear vibration, and it's so easy to get put back into it. But when we get this resonance from the natural light from the sun that we all know they've been trying to block out for ages, suddenly our batteries are recharged physically, emotionally and spiritually.
Yep, they certainly are. I completely agree. What I'd love to get into in this conversation is talk a lot more than we did first time about animals. Because I know animals are a massive area of passion and expertise for you, and it's a big area of interest for me. You know, I had a beautiful dog who we sadly lost a couple of years ago, and I still struggle every time I think about it because of the connection and the love that you have for them. And I'm sure many people watching this in different parts of the world will feel exactly the same, whether they've got cats, dogs, horses, and so on. But I want to dive into this whole concept of consciousness within animals, and how animals seem to be able to pick up on things that we can't as human beings. And the reason this is something I wanted to dive into today, I'm sure you've seen the really sad news over the last week of the footballer Diogo Jota, who died in a car crash in Spain. Well, I read a story a couple of days afterwards about his two dogs that were at the home in Portugal, and they started acting very agitated and very aggressively, and started scratching at his particular armchair apparently in the house in the hour or so leading up to when they got the news of what had happened. And you've seen this and heard these kind of stories before of animals all of a sudden being obsessed with one person, and then that person goes, hang on a minute, then they get a diagnosis very soon afterwards, and it's like the animals pick up on something that we're not seeing and picking up on. Have you done much research into that?
I've done a lot of anecdotal research, because to actually research it scientifically, I think a lot of the problems when it comes to animals, there's so much abuse in animal experimentation. Even often the behavioural or nutritional experimentation involves doing awful things to them to get the results to convince us humans what the animals already know. But for the last literally 30 years, Jaymie, I have been working so closely, not only with domesticated animals, but I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of wild animals as well, everything from elephants to nature in the UK. And what we see time and time again is they can absolutely pick up. I call it from the ether. You might want to call it the divine matrix, the morphic field, whatever your name for it. But this invisible energy field that connects everything. And years ago, it was probably about 12, 13 years ago, I was on a program called The Secret Life of Cats, and they tracked cats, and they got loads more data than they showed on the TV show series. And at the time, I was working from home, but going out day in, day out to do consults with other people's animals. So because of that, I might be going to Manchester one day, locally the next day. I wasn't on a regular schedule. And what this team realised when they were doing some recording is they noticed that before I came back into the house, all my cats would accumulate in the garden. So I had some ladies who were working for me in my little room at home, and they said, we never need to worry about knowing when you're coming back. So we need to get out of the deck chairs and get on with our work, because all the cats will accumulate. And we know that there's a tsunami that the animals can pick it up. They can pick up weather patterns. So they can also pick up, we know that dogs can sniff diseases, and other animals can do it as well. And organizations like HeartMath have been studying for years the resonant field, the heart energy that different species give off. And for example, dogs have got the largest heart in relation to body mass that they've measured in any animal, and horses give off the largest heart energy field. Obviously, they haven't studied every animal, so that doesn't mean the case that others wouldn't show more. But these animals, I 100% know. I work with something called animal communication, which gets poo-pooed from a scientific point of view, but there's a huge amount of interest now in the telepathy tapes and looking at autistic children and how they can communicate telepathically. And any ancient indigenous tribe knows that this is the case. They've been doing it forever. Whether what they call it might be different, but the skills of tuning in and picking up the energy of a different animal, and the animal picking up the energy of you, has been known since ancient times. And I think one of the saddest things I've seen in modern times when people talk about awakening is I'm still seeing this huge disconnect from nature and every creature great and small in it. And quite honestly, I think this is one of the reasons why, as a race, in my personal controversial opinion, we're moving in the wrong direction is because we're still doing it from such a human-centric point of view and not taking into account the impact on all our creatures, great and small, in this wonderful planet. And obviously, I'm not talking about global warming. So, yes, I have seen so many examples of this happening. It never surprises me yet. What surprises me is how few people are prepared to open their minds and recognise it. And just a practical example, you know, a lot of people are struggling at the moment to understand who can they trust, what information can they trust. Well, all you've got to do is be in the presence of that person with a dog or a cat or horse, and they'll give you the answer very, very clearly. So there's so much we can learn from them to tune into those parts of ourselves that are so hidden now and having absolutely devastating effect on the way we live our life.
Yep, I completely agree. I had a very interesting situation a few years ago with my dog Kennedy, who was generally didn't really care about people. To be honest, she was very high maintenance, but she wasn't really bothered about people. She wasn't one of those dogs that would go up and jump up at people or anything like that. And she absolutely lost her mind at this one particular person who was in my life for a very short period. And I've never seen her react like that. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, you're telling me something there, and within a week or so, it was very obvious that she'd called it spot on. But you mentioned something really interesting there about dogs and animals being aware of tsunamis, and that reminds me actually of that devastating tsunami all those years ago at the Indian Ocean on Boxing Day. And I remember the news then being about how few animals died compared to human beings because they knew something was coming and they got the hell out of Dodge. It's a really fascinating area that, going back, you know, that's 20 odd years ago nearly now. And it's really clear that this has been around for a very long time. But like you say, it's dismissed by mainstream science, probably because they can't really understand or explain it, because when it comes to the more conscious esoteric stuff, they're completely lost. They can't really explain anything. The same with some of the amazing cures there's been for different illnesses in human beings that they can't explain. They just dismiss as you know, as quackery and so on, things like homeopathy, when again they've been around a lot longer than modern medicine. So what I find really interesting is the dynamic between humans and animals, because for so many people, particularly, you know, people that are on their own, people that are very elderly, you know, that interaction with their animals, whether they're cats, whether they're dogs, that's their, in a sense, that's their reason for still being. That's their interaction on a daily basis that gives them that comfort and that warmth. And I think we've always looked at pets as perhaps as an extended member of the family, because they bring so much to our lives, don't they? And I think people that don't have dogs or haven't had cats or things like that, they probably don't understand how much they're missing out on with the amount that these things bring to your life. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I honestly think that every child should have the opportunity to be brought up with animals. The downside of that is I don't think as humans we spend enough time researching and looking into and using our common sense about what the animals in our life need. So I should be obsolete as a profession. I help people that have got physical, emotional problems, behavioural problems, lots and lots of physical issues these years with their animals, and rebalance them naturally. But I think when you can't buy pets for children, because a child is not going to have the knowledge or necessarily the sense of responsibility to look after them. And, you know, my pet hate is people getting things like rabbits and guinea pigs and hamsters and putting them in a cage. It's just absolutely cruel. And I think it does more harm than good what you're teaching the child. But this is where I think community, you know, having a chance to go and work and see where milk comes from. You know, most children now in the UK and America have got no idea where their vegetables come from. They can't identify the fruit, the vegetables. They've got no idea where milk comes from. And when you are that disconnected, it really has a huge detrimental effect on yourself and your own self of safety. And we know that the powers that be, and I hate calling them that, the dysfunctional idiots that are playing us like Muppets, very effectively, I do have to say, unfortunately. It's when you're in that fear vibration, but when you're out in nature and interacting with animals, they give you the information very clearly. But I do think, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I've noticed a huge increase in frequency disruption with animals over the last, I've probably been aware of it for the last 10 years. Now, a lot of people have studied the migrational paths of birds, for example, getting interrupted. And with things like all the satellites that are in the sky and the 5G and everything, unfortunately, the good thing about our animals is they're more sensitive and they can pick up these things quicker than we are. The bad thing is they fall victim to them much quicker than we do. It's that old canary in the gas chamber scenario. And I think our animals are really, really struggling now. I think they're struggling with anxiety and fear because they don't trust the humans and the decisions we're making for them. I think that they can't pick up the signals that they need from their environment in the same way. Most animals, their dominant sense is smell. And most animals in nature, that is their dominant sense. That's what they're literally reading their environment by. A dog can smell, a dog or a horse can smell the wee or poo of another animal and know exactly if they're stressed, what stage of their hormonal or reproductive cycle, if they're ill, if they're giving off fear pheromones. And when we're disrupting all these frequency transmissions through what we spray from the sky, what we're putting out through the bloody 5G, etc., I think it's a much bigger problem than most of us realise. And I am definitely seeing the disruption signs in the animals, both physically and behaviourally. But I do think you're right. I think if people had that connection again, I think we wouldn't be programmable in the same way we are. Because when you are literally working with nature, you don't fall for the bullshit. You don't fall for the lies because you've got that sense of the hierarchy of needs of what you need to survive, and you can smell a lie and bullshit a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really fascinating is that the connection between humans and animals, not just the standard domestic pets that we've talked about, but animals in general is something that I don't think we've even begun to tap into in terms of the potential there. Like, we've all seen, as I'm sure everyone watching would have seen, incredible videos over the years on Facebook and Instagram of, grown men and women stood up having big cuddles and rolling around in the jungle with lions that they've known since they were cubs and so on, and have that connection because they've known them since they were little. And there's definitely a deeper connection there. You can clearly see it. It's visually represented in what you see. You've got a wild animal that in theory would tear you from limb to limb that's behaving like a domestic cat, dog. It's very, those sort of videos every time choke me up. They're just so beautiful to see. And I think an interesting thing I never hear talked about very often is when you go back, centuries and centuries to the ancient world, where we wouldn't have had the big fences, the big cities, the big infrastructure, if you like, to separate the wild animal world from us. We'd have been living in tribes, we'd have been living in the rainforests, in the jungles ourselves, and so on. There wouldn't have been that barrier between the animal world and the human world. So in theory, human beings would have just got massacred, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
If you look at it from that perspective. Like, I hear a lot of people that talk about the carnivore diet being the answer, talk about the fact we're an apex predator. Well, we're not.
No.
We're an apex predator if we have guns and weapons and all of that. On pure physicality, we're pretty weak. We wouldn't last very long in the jungle without any support. But at some point we must have done. At some point we must have lived much more in harmony with the wild animal world. It's something I've just thought of like a tangent, but that must have surely been the case at some point.
I think you sent goosebumps down me, actually, Jaymie, because this, I think, is the missing link about why we're not getting the answers about how we need to move forward again. And I was lucky enough to spend a few weeks out in Zambia working at an elephant orphanage. And in the elephant orphanage, they have no zoos or areas where these elephants, when their mothers have been massacred by poachers, they either get well enough to be released back in the wild or they don't. There's no sort of other happy ending for them. And what I saw there is the keepers in Zambia they didn't have formal training, but their connection with these elephants and the trust that they built up is something that I've never seen so before. It was so special. Now, even a baby elephant makes a horse look tiny. These animals are huge when you get up close to them and could squash you in one footprint, but they will follow the keepers all through the bush all day because they're picking up the resonance. They've got that energetic communication that they know that the keepers have got their best interest at heart and they're safer with them, even these baby elephants. And the keepers trust the elephants because they're giving off that whole energy of I'm here to help you. Now, when we used to live in harmony with nature, whether it's 100 years ago more or thousands and thousands of years ago, we had boundaries and respect. So you didn't take from nature. One of the main rules of nature is you never take more than you need. And yes, there are territories. So every herd of horses, every pack of wolves will have their own territories. And when two packs of wolves' territories start to overlap, that's when you'll get issues because there is competition for resources. But when their territories don't overlap, there are no issues and they carry on living in balance with their environment. So the animal population can't breed and survive if there's not enough vegetation, for example, to support them. And I think this is where, again, putting people into cities and living in cities has disrupted all of that balance. There's so many arguments going on about population numbers for humans. And if maintaining current population and not letting the human populations decline means we all move out of cities and get back to living in little communities or villages or whatever you want to do in balance with nature, not taking more, respecting the wildlife, looking after the ground, the soil, the plants, and sharing it with the other wildlife that we've got, so many of our problems disappear. It's this human ability to always want to take more than what we need, which will be our downfall, as it's showing very much now. And there are plenty of examples still in the world where you can go out and see this beautiful harmony and respect. So the lion will only come into the village and start eating the humans if the humans take away all their food source. It works well until the humans start to get greedy and want to control everything and take it away from everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a human disease. I think that's definitely a human disease. We've been conditioned to believe that hoarding and having more than we need is positive. It's a good thing when it's not. The amount that we waste. I can't imagine, a lion in the wild having too much food and then saving some for later, letting it go out of date, throwing it away. All those things that we do because we have abundance and we probably take that for granted, certainly in the Western world. It's very, very sad to see. And like you say, the disconnection from nature, the moving into the cities, the concrete jungles where there's nothing natural about them, has coincided with a massive decline in health. It's coincided with a bigger disconnect between us and the animal kingdom. When we all share this planet together. And I think one thing that I find very frustrating about this subject and discussing this subject is that you mentioned earlier the climate change hoax.
Yeah.
Is that has kind of hijacked anyone that thinks that we should live in harmony with nature to an extent.
Absolutely.
It's hijacked that debate. It's hijacked that whole, you believe in environmental concerns, you must be one of those just stop oil lunatics. When actually, no. If anything, they actually are trying to destroy the environment with the things that they want to do by sticking solar panels and wind turbines everywhere and, fracking and destroying the animal kingdom as a result of things like that. No one ever wants to talk about the effect on birds of wind turbines, for example.
Exactly.
And the fishing communities and the seas of those offshore ones. So that frustrates me a lot because and I don't feel that's an accident, that's been hijacked and those two things have been very much intertwined with each other when they are fundamentally different. Because wanting to live in harmony with nature, wanting to, give back and wanting to protect wildlife and protect, natural habitats of animals and so on, and not have extinct species and all of that, that should be surely a basic concern and a basic belief of everybody on this planet, because there's only one planet. We've all got to live in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
And how much better would it be if we did that rather than, in a sense, focused on just preserving ourselves? Really,
Completely.
the only time I hear the animal world and the importance of it be discussed is when people talk about bees. Talk about we've got to protect bees.
Yes.
Without bees, we won't have any food. Again, it always comes back to us. It's very, very strange.
See what we're giving out. I just, it's so important what you've just said. When we're talking like this, we're complaining about the elites, whatever you want to call them, in one respect, and how they want to take everything for us. And yet so many people in our daily language and way we live, see everything else as a resource for us. Take the argument, you mentioned the carnivore diet. Now, everyone's so prickly when they start talking about diet. And if you're really happy with your choices, you're not reactive like that. You can't be triggered like that. But it's pretty common sense that we should all be eating what we can grow or catch in our local environment. And this ridiculous argument, on one side, you've got the carnivores blaming everything on the vegans and saying how ridiculous because your avocados take more resources to grow than this. And we're missing the whole point is all of us are eating out of balance. How many people watching this are actually eating seasonally for where they live in the world, locally produced product, and not eating too much? I mean, all of us eat too much. We're used to it. It's again part of the fear response when at that subconscious level you've got that lack mentality, and so you're consciously eating as if the next famine's coming. And I think these arguments and these divisions, I mean, if I see one more stupid argument about the carnivores arguing about the vegans, you're both playing into the game so ridiculously. They're both extremes. You can do both if you want. I mean, good luck to anyone in 10 years' time when they've been on the carnivore diet for 10 years. That's all I'll say. Good luck with that as a biologist. It's not going to end well. But in terms of what we should be eating, we should be looking around what's in our local area. At the moment, all the berries are coming out, and obviously the salad crops, and, there's chickens and pheasants around. And we've got to get back to some sort of normality. It's absolutely ridiculous. We're the only species on the whole world that need bloody nutritionists. Excuse my swearing today. But the fact that I have to advise people on how to not to feed their dogs and cats brown lumps of kibble.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming people because we've all been brainwashed so much. But if you just spent a day out in nature, watching the birds, watching the squirrels, watching the horses, watching the sheep, watching your cat and eat a mouse, things would start clicking back into place for you. And we'd just be like, yeah, I've been hoodwinked. Now I need to get back to some sensible reality and stop taking more than I need.
Yeah.
Stop fighting against people about ridiculous things about what diet they want to eat. Anyone who's spending too much attention trying to force their belief systems down someone else, whatever it is, has got that inbuilt insecurity, and it's not a great thing.
No, absolutely. Nutrition's a fascinating subject. So let's sort of segue into that a little bit, because I do think there's an area we can look into in how nutrition within humans and how nutrition and eating habits with animals actually should ours parallel theirs rather than the other way around. And so I've concluded, I've read tons and tons of books and watched hours and hours, hundreds of hours of podcasts over the last few years, and tried pretty much every diet myself for at least a month, just out of interest to see how I felt. So, if ever I was asked a question, I could give a personal experience, because I'll only ever speak to how something's affected me. I won't ever say, this is what you should do. I'll go, well, I tried it and this is how it affected me. And, both the extreme diets you mentioned there, carnivore and vegan, I felt dreadful on, absolutely dreadful, for different reasons. But one thing that I think is really interesting is you mentioned about eating too much. Yeah. And we're obviously told in the West, men, you need 2,500 calories a day. Women, you need 2,000 calories a day. Now, I've concluded my research that calories are actually completely irrelevant. It's nutrients that matter. It's nutrients that matter. If you're having 1,000 calories of incredibly nutrient-dense food, you're going to feel more satiated, your body, your muscles, your brain is going to feel sharper and more vibrant than if you have 5,000 calories of ultra-processed rubbish. Simple as that. Also, the eating 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch and dinner and all of that and so on, that we've kind of been taught is how you should eat. They're your habits, couple of snacks maybe. Whereas in the animal world, they eat a lot more how we probably would have when we were hunter-gatherers, which is basically you ate when there was food to eat. You ate when you'd hunted, when you'd caught, when you'd grown. You might not have necessarily eaten for a couple of days and then you'd have had a big feast and then you might not have eaten until you caught something again. And I wonder if, it's a very long question, but I wonder if the psychology of eating too much, when you mentioned there about fear of the next famine, is there something hardwired in our brain that when we have food available in front of us, and a good example of this is like a buffet when you're on holiday, a big all-inclusive buffet, you don't know when you're going to eat again, deep down in your brain, so therefore you fill your boots because you might not eat for 2 or 3 days, which is how it would have been once upon a time. Yeah. Do you think there's still a little bit of that hardwired into us, and that's why in those circumstances people tend to overeat, or why people generally tend to overeat? And do you think we should be looking more at the animal world at, maybe they eat once a day, maybe they eat twice a day. They don't have fixed, I have to have this, and this. They just focus on the nutrients, and when they're full, they're full.
Yeah, I think there's so many areas to unpick on that. I think from what I've learned, I have never, ever, ever, I couldn't tell you any calories at all. I've never looked at calories. I've never weighed food for myself or my animals. It's pretty common sense. If I'm putting on weight and then I need to stop eating, it will change what I'm eating. If I'm losing weight, I might need to eat some more, change what I'm eating. And same with my animals. And with the way our bodies work, absolutely, we are still hardwired. Whatever you think about where humans came from and what our real history is, most animals are opportunistic. And if something's put in front of them, they're sort of, okay, I need to take advantage of this resource now. For many reasons. It can be because they don't know where their next meal's coming from. It can be because they're in a climate where that food's not going to keep. It's going to go off. Different animals have different stomach acids and can cope with different levels of gone off food. For example, cats and dogs are very different on that. But also it's the nutrient density of the food. So if you're eating a species appropriate diet, and for humans, that can be a huge range of things and will change not only based on where you live in the world, but also the seasons and your own personal health status. We all accept that pregnant women will have cravings and will be craving certain things because they're feeding for two. So I think in terms of why we overeat, part of it, I think, is that adaptation to we're still hardwired to take resources when we can. But part of it is because most of our food is so nutritionally depleted. And then you've also got the psychological aspect of whether you want to call it comfort eating, where a lot of people now use food as a displacement behavior, as a stress reduction technique, food, alcohol, cigarettes, porn, whatever it might be. So there's so many complications. But one thing I can honestly say is, I've got 5 cats. They live out in nature. They've got access to hunt whenever they want. They will never overeat. I've never had a fat cat. The only time I've ever seen a fat cat is when they're kept inside and they're fed processed food. Yeah. Or they might even be fed good food inside, but they've not got the choice of it. They've only got the choice of what their human puts down for them. And you see that a lot in nature. So the more choice you give an animal, the less likely they are to have any food issues. Obviously, it's much more difficult for, say, dogs, that most dogs aren't capable now of going out and catching their own food. But again, when you start feeding them, for example, with my dogs are on a really good, best quality I can afford raw diet, and I mix it up quite a lot, they won't overeat. They don't overeat, but they will, all the junk food that we might have in our house, they've all got chemicals in that make them addictive to people. Everyone knows the Pringles story. So that applies to our animals as well. If you're feeding your dogs junk food, they can't recognize it in food the same way as they would eating a rabbit. If a dog goes out, a dog would never go out and catch 10 rabbits at once and keep them there for later. They catch a rabbit, eat what they wanted of it, and leave the scraps for someone else to finish it.
Right. Whereas you see the opposite with the dog foods and the over sugar. It's very similar to kids' food in the sense of, from the research I did when we got Kennedy, I obviously did loads of research into dog food, and we did the same as you, ended up on a raw diet. But to be fair, I never had dogs growing up, neither did my wife. So when we first picked her up, we were really clueless, to be honest. We were given a big pack of pedigree puppy by the breeder. And we took it home and we thought, well, that's what we're going to give her. And within a couple of weeks, we'd done a bit of research and got her onto raw and better stuff. But you realise that the brands that you see sponsoring Crufts and have all the big adverts on the TV, when you really look into it, they're actually just full of rubbish. They're toxic. They're full of so much stuff. And then there's a big parallel between that and the food that you see pushed up on kids, all of the sweet treats or supposedly healthy treats, cereals and things like that. There's a lot of parallels. There's so much sugar. There's so much toxic stuff. So much so much starch, and it leads to. We noticed. I'm sure you've seen this in people that you've helped. Huge behaviour changes once you get them onto decent stuff. And kids are the same, isn't it? You have a kid full of sugar. They're going to be hyper. They're going to be annoying. They're going to be over the top. You get kids full of really good nutrition. They're going to be much better behaved. They're going to have more energy. They're going to be happier. Going to be sharper at school or at home and so on. So there's not really any differences. It's pretty much the same scenario they're doing, isn't it?
And look what they've been doing with our pets for ages. You know, if a child grows up thinking it's normal to feed their cat, dog, guinea pig out of a box of dry food, they're not going to see anything wrong with feeding themselves packaged food. Whilst if they grow up in a home where the parents cook from scratch and they're used to seeing, even if it's grandparents growing and going picking food from their own garden, then or from a communal garden, then it's a very different mentality. And I think all of this subliminal programming is so powerful. As you said, you and your wife didn't grow up with animals, so you had to learn. But most of us were so busy, so tired, so exhausted from the lack of nutrition and sunlight and exposure to all the EMFs and everything we've got. There are only so many hours in the day, so no one person can research it all. That's the problem, and that's what they rely on. And I think this is where coming together in communities and all having the little bit of the expertise and sharing that around is absolutely key moving forward, because the marketing and even the subliminal marketing that we think we're not exposed to, but we are, it's so powerful that it takes a lot for people to come in to overcome it. And even, you know, the whole biology, I've been questioning a lot now, looking really deep into the germ theory, the terrain theory. Do we even have cells? Is the heart really a pump? Is DNA what they say it is? And when you start looking into it, there's so much that we've been told as truth that absolutely isn't. That I think questioning everything, and if you're feeling really healthy and really vibrant and really energetic, you're doing things right, keep going. But if you're not, don't be afraid to question things. And that has to come with questioning your belief systems as well, because our belief systems are often not our own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%. I think most people, I did another podcast yesterday with Dr. Malik, and I said to him that I think we've been conditioned as human beings to accept that 6 out of 10 is good enough. That's acceptable. Yeah. Hence why, you know, when you ask most people, how are you doing today? How many people turn around and go, you know what, I'm doing brilliant. I'm loving life. Yeah. Most people will say, oh, I'm doing all right. I'm not too bad. Could be worse. Mediocre, somewhere in the middle. And I think we've been conditioned to accept that that's how everything should be. You know, your marriage, your job, etc. And also a big one is how you feel. You know, if you wake up, you're a bit tired in the morning, you know, you can't sleep great, you bottle of wine to unwind the day, you feel a bit lethargic, can't wait for the weekend, those sort of things. We've been conditioned to think that's normal and that, you know, we should accept that because so many, unfortunately, feel exactly the same. Very few people would you go and speak to who say, yeah, I'm great, I feel great. Bounce out of bed, I'm in the gym, I'm getting stronger every week, I'm getting quicker on the road, got so much time. All of those things, most people don't say that. So we've been kind of hoodwinked into thinking that feeling mediocre and somewhere in the middle is okay. And therefore people don't do what you're saying, which is strive for better and strive for more by looking, going, okay, you know what, I've had enough of feeling tired. I've had enough of needing 2 coffees to get myself going in the morning. I'm going to look at what I'm eating. I'm going to get a diary and I'm going to write how I felt half an hour after eating every single thing I eat for the next week and see if there's any common themes between me eating that and feeling sluggish or eating that and feeling good. We're not encouraged to do that when really that's actually really basic. And if everyone just started doing that, very quickly you'd notice a few patterns, wouldn't you, within a week?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a child, we had to walk everywhere and we always lived in the middle of nowhere. So even when we got the school bus home, it was like, 45 minutes walk home through the woods to sort of get there. And, if I say to people, I mean, I don't wear any trackers, but I do carry my phone most places with me. So, it will tell you roughly how many steps you've got. And I don't think there's ever a day where I don't do 18,000 steps or more.
Wow.
And I was talking to Dr. Andreas Kalka about the chlorine dioxide solution. And he was saying that, we're designed to be moving as humans, minimum of 10 kilometers a day. And our Labrador dogs double that. And yet, most people struggle to do 1,000 steps a day, particularly in America. And we have to move. Our bodies don't work properly if they don't move. A horse can't digest its food properly if it's shut in a stable. We have to be moving a lot, and we have to be, that moving should be bending down to dig out the potatoes, chopping wood, not just going to a gym and running on a treadmill. And when you start to realise how good you can feel, it's a complete game changer. I went to see a brilliant Czech practitioner yesterday because I realised I had some injuries that I'd let get quite out of hand and hadn't addressed. So I'm not sitting there blaming anyone else. I'm like, Catherine, there's no point not practicing what you're preaching. So I went to see someone yesterday. And I feel great because now I know what I've got to do to really start addressing that. And we have to sort of take responsibility for ourselves and sort of say, this isn't suiting me. The body's always giving you clues. Your animals are always giving you clues. It is absolutely, you are doing something horribly wrong if your dog or cat is overweight. And that's your responsibility, just like if your child is. It's your responsibility as their parent, not the child. The child can't do anything about it. Not the dog can't do anything about it. And it's not about shaming ourselves. And this is where this has been such a deliberate ploy of political correctness. It's not about shaming yourself. We all go off the rails. Yeah. We all do. I mean, the last year, I have personally spent far too much time in front of my computer and not enough time in my lane. And I can recognise the impact it's having. So now I'm recognising it. It's my job, no one else's, to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's key. That's absolutely key. I've mentioned this a couple of times in shows I've done the last few days, which is most of the problems we have in the world have come from people delegating responsibility to the system mainly, or certainly to other people. And we know what's best for us. You know what's best for you. You know if your diet or your lifestyle works for you because you know how you feel in terms of your physical health. You know how you feel in terms of your emotional stability, in terms of your mindset. No one can tell you. You know that. Hence why, there's people out there that on the surface may have everything. They've got a beautiful family, they've got millions in the bank, and they're depressed. And the same way you've got people who have got absolutely nothing, but are very happy. You can't dictate to somebody what their experience is. It's very much theirs. So as a result, we need to be making sure that we're the ones that are in control of those things. We're not delegating that responsibility to others. And I think what's really key is you can get accused of preaching in a sense when you talk about these topics. But for me, I always say I've not got, similar to what you just said then, I certainly don't have all of them down. I certainly don't have all of them right. But I'm not going to stop trying until I do. And I think that's the point. As long as you are self-aware enough to go, you know what, I've fallen off the rails a little bit. I have, for example, with myself, since I came back from holiday a couple of weeks ago, the getting up at 4 a.m. to get out onto the road, I've struggled with that. I've done it, but I've struggled with it. I've not been bouncing out of bed to go and do it because I'd got used to 7:30, 8 o'clock lines while on holiday, and it's a bit of a hard reset. But you strive for it anyway. And I think that's the key, and it kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago, which is you should always strive for your best. You should never accept 6 out of 10, unless 6 out of 10 makes you happy, of course, but I'd say for most people it doesn't. We should always strive for more. And really key thing I'd love to dive into, which you mentioned there about listening to your body. Because obviously our body's always sending us messages, and my kind of attitude towards it is if you ignore the message will just get louder and louder and louder till eventually you can't ignore it. But so many people have been conditioned, and also you mentioned there, people are so busy, life's so full, they don't take the time to sit and go, actually, how do I feel today? Do I feel better than I did yesterday? Do I feel really sluggish and tired? Am I having a hard time remembering what I did five minutes ago? all of those things that really you should be observing and being a bit more self-aware. Because we've spoken through this podcast a lot about connection with nature, connection with animals, connection with the planet that we're on. But we haven't dived into, and I'd love to dive into to finish, the connection with ourselves.
Yeah.
The connection with your own consciousness, your own body, your own mind, and being in tune with it. Because
it's so important. And there's so many ways you can do that. And I would say that, we all go through different stages in life. So someone who's got young children, our husband and wife or partners that have got young children, your priorities are going to be very different. And what you're able to do for yourself will be very dictated by your children. So I think being aware of what phase you're in life and just being fully present with that. There's no point someone saying to you, you need 8 hours of sleep a night if you've got a new baby. You're not going to get 8 hours of sleep a night. And just being with that moment, we're incredibly resilient. But once your children are 10 years old, if you're still then on your computer late at night and not getting sleep and everything, then you can do something about it. But I think there's several ways of tuning in for yourself. It's about being honest. We're in a society now where people take offense at everything. So I was with a really good friend yesterday, and one of the things about our relationships that's so special is we can be really honest with each other without the other one taking offense. And if you've got to be a good friend to yourself. So you need to be able to look in the mirror. It's not about aesthetics. It's about what you feel comfortable for the lifestyle that you choose to lead. And so it's not about being a certain weight. It's not about how toned you are and whether you've got abs or six packs, unless that's important to you. But most people will feel very, very vulnerable. If you can't squat down and hold a squat position comfortably, you're very vulnerable. One, you can't go to the loo if you're out in the woods, if you're a girl. But secondly, in all seriousness, you're going to be very vulnerable. If you can't chop your own wood, if you can't dig your own garden, if you can't maintain bodily functions, you don't need to look like a gym buff if that's not your thing. But equally, if you can't run away from trouble, if you can't walk all day if you need to, if there's a sudden flood and you need to climb a tree or get out the way or walk to high ground, you're going to feel very vulnerable. And whether you're conscious of it or not, that vulnerability is going to sit with you and you're going to be much more controllable. So we wouldn't expect an 80-year-old to be the same thing as a healthy 30-year-old. But most 80-year-olds in a lot of parts of the country, they are very mobile. They've got their marbles about them. They can still cook for themselves. They can still walk a certain distance. So I think tuning in with yourself and being honest, as a woman, as a middle-aged woman, I get so annoyed about the whole menopause thing because you don't have to suffer during menopause. It's a completely natural biological process. And if you're suffering through it, it's because your body's out of balance. That's not shaming anyone. Everything around us is pushing our bodies out of balance. But if you don't take responsibility for that, then it's you that's going to suffer. No one else. There's lots of people that will benefit from you being out of balance and try and push their products onto you. So I think the best way for me is we need to disconnect from these devices. We need to make sure we've got time where we're not listening to a podcast, where we're not consuming content. We haven't got the TV or radio on in the background, because you cannot be taking in different things, two things at one time. That age-old saying, you can't be happy and sad at the same time. We have to learn to sit with ourselves, even if it's just for small periods of time. You don't need to do a full-blown meditation. We have to ground ourselves. And people think that's a biohacking tool. It's common sense. Most people live in synthetic buildings, built-up buildings, surrounded by Wi-Fi and goodness knows what else. I promise you, if you just go and stand barefoot outside for 10 minutes, you'll get some answers to the questions you want. If you can't do that, if it's muddy, if it's cold, if it's prickly, just go and lean against a tree or sit against a tree for 10 minutes and see how you feel. And then be the type of friend that's giving good, honest, heartfelt advice. If your friend's struggling with your health, don't say, oh, darling, you look beautiful, you look everything. If they're not happy, saying, great, what can I do to support you through that? Would it help if when we go out, we don't go to a pub, we go for a walk instead and take a juice with us, or water with us? Would it help if we Do you need some company starting something? Be a good friend. A good friend and a good parent doesn't always do the easy answer and the easy thing. And that goes to being a good parent for your dog and cat and guinea pig and horse or whatever, reptile, whatever it might be. Tough love is important if it's coming from the right place, and be the type of person where people can give that feedback to you as well. Because if you look at the general population now, most of us are well below par of, if something really went disastrously wrong, how many of us could actually feed ourselves, could walk to safety, could find fresh water, could climb a tree? It is important things. It's not fear mongering. This trauma sits with you deep, even if you're not consciously aware of it and you think, well, that would never happen to me. Deep down, you're vulnerable. And just like every animal gives off pheromones, most people have heard of pheromones, and that's why your dog can smell cancer, can smell drugs, can smell if another dog is bringing their pack into weakness and they'll expel them from the pack. We're all giving off pheromones at an unconscious level. We know if we're below par, but so does everyone else around us. And that's when you're likely to be taken advantage of.
Yes, absolutely. 100% that's the case. 100% that's the case. And I think the last question I'd like to dive into is everything you've mentioned there about being, really good supportive friend, looking after the people close to you, wanting what's best for them. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes that doesn't mean giving them an answer they want to hear. Sometimes that means being the bearer of bad news. Sometimes that means some tough love, some honest feedback. Nope, that doesn't suit you, what you're wearing. If you want to wear that, yes, probably, you need to lose a few pounds.
Yeah.
If people are continuing to have the same situation arise in their life again. I mean, we've all got scenarios where you've seen it with friends that continue to date the same type of characters and they all end in the same way, for example, and at some point you have to encourage them to look at themselves. But how would you go about advising somebody? Let's say somebody comes in to see you now, they're a little bit overweight, they're not very happy in their lives, they don't feel particularly great, they're looking to make some adjustments, they're, say, my age, mid-30s, and but they're worried about the reaction of their social circle. They're worried about the reaction of their family, because everyone else around them is in the same situation as them, and they would be the one that would be breaking that mold. They would be the one that would be going, hang on a minute, I'm not happy, I'm looking around, you're all not happy, I'm going to step out and do something different. And we know that, there is people like you that exist, that would be people that would go, great on you, fantastic, how can I help? But there's also that old adage of misery loves company, and people don't like people that will do something that will then confront them and make them look at themselves and go, hang on a minute, they're doing something different. They were like me, now they're making changes and they look like they're thriving. I don't like that. That triggers me because that makes me feel bad about myself. How would you encourage somebody to deal with that and to get through that without being pulled back in by the people around them that maybe aren't so supportive?
That is such a good question. And I think it's the biggest thing that holds people back. And if you're a parent watching this, I think you'll find it easier, because most of us that are parents, we know we have to let's face it, we're making decisions for our children long before they're even conceived. Our health at conception, we don't often know that, but we're making decisions for our children all the way through their lives until they're adults and they leave home. And even then I still try, but they ignore it. But in all seriousness, I think having someone supportive around you that can hear you and listen to you and just let you talk through what you really want, because most people don't know what they really want. You have to make a change for you. And if you really love your family members or your friends or your support circle, the highest form of love is being the best version of yourself. And that sounds so cheesy, but no parent would sit there and honestly think, I'm loving my child by keeping them really unhealthy, by keeping them overweight so they're going to get teased at school, or taking away chances for them. And I'm not talking about, obviously there's a whole range of weights that are healthy for different structures and different types. I'm not talking about anyone needing to be a supermodel here. But I think when you want to make a change, one of the most important things that's going to make a difference as to whether you can do it or not is find someone that can support you through that. And if you haven't got that in your immediate circle, that's when you either want to employ some sort of coach or health practitioner to work with you on that, or there's some amazing supportive free online groups. And also, you can get yourself in the company. It is 100% true that you are the product of the 10 people that you spend the most time with. And people can argue about that as much as you like, but anyone can walk into a room and see a group of friends and see whether that's true or not.
Yep.
It's the kindest thing, not only for yourself, but anyone that you truly care about, just to keep asking questions, not from a period of beating yourself up. You know, I'm probably got the unhealthiest this last year that I've ever been. And that was because of choices I was making to do with work and sitting there and doing this. And I could just feel myself slipping more and more. And I'm really grateful for the friends that said, yeah, you have put on weight. Yeah, you have done this. It's really important because you know it. And they weren't doing it being mean. I knew it myself. And I think getting someone that's going to support you and get in company, it doesn't matter whether it's online, whether it's in a local gym, whether it's anyone in your family that you can say, can we do this together? Will you support me? I really want to do this. Will you come out for a hike with me every week? Will you come shopping with me and stop me putting that bottle of wine in the trolley? Will it just ask for help? I think a lot of people will want to do it with you, but most humans are looking for someone else to lead them. And haven't we seen that hugely over the last 5 years? Well, be that person that's prepared to. You don't need to know the answers. None of us do. What's right for me won't necessarily be right for someone else, but you do need that support network. And if you haven't got it in your group of friends, it can be really important to step away from that. You don't have to ostracize them. You don't have to fall out with them, but you do have to make sure you're spending more time with someone or something that raises you up to a level that sort of keeps your battery charged, that you can do this, you can make changes, you can be supported on that journey. So even if that means cutting down the amount of time you have or adding someone constructive into your life.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just reading this book at the moment called The Let Them Theory by
I've read that. Yeah,
called Mel Robbins, and
yeah,
you can apply that logic to this massively, which is no one, you can't dictate how somebody else reacts, but you can dictate how you react to how they react. And if you've got people around you that are not supportive, it's your decision whether you let that deter you or not. It's your decision whether you let that bother you or not. Whereas for me, what I found really fascinating, the chapter I've just read was about, 90% of people have the emotional intelligence of an 8-year-old.
completely.
So when you look at people, when you look at adults and you look at the way they behave, and then you apply that argument to it and think, I'm just going to picture you as an 8-year-old at this point.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the opinion and the insult or the attempts to diminish you feel very, very irrelevant, because you wouldn't listen to an 8-year-old telling you that you're living your life the wrong way if you're choosing to eat better and start exercising. So you'd actually just go, yeah, whatever, and then you do what you believed anyway. So I think a lot of people can apply that kind of theory to that if they've got people around them that are maybe not supportive. And I think you're right in the sense of being that leader, being that one to set an example, because as obviously there'll be people in your group that may not agree with you, and it'll be confronting for them, as we've mentioned. But on the other hand, there'll be people that might look at you in 3 months and go, you know what, you look a lot happier, mate.
Exactly.
Your marriage looks a lot better than it did. You're spending more time with your partner. Your relationship with your kids looks a lot more improved. That t-shirt's a good size smaller than the one you were wearing last year. And then that may encourage and inspire others to do the same. And on a sort of a more micro level, it's the same example as what people look up at celebrities. They look up at people in positions of influence and idolize them in many ways because they have a life, or they have the accolades that so many desire. And you can do that, I think, in a small friendship circle. If you're in your group of 6 friends and you all of a sudden start taking yourself more seriously and looking after yourself and are doing better and look better and feel better as a result, that could be that inspiration for the other 5 to start doing the same. So I always think we're communicating with people all the time. You don't even need to speak.
Yeah, completely. And I had this exact conversation. I've got a very good friend in America, and this is a perfect example of what you just said. He had type 2 diabetes. He'd lost his eyesight and was having his driving license taken away for the type 2 diabetes. He was extremely overweight in a very stressful job. He took responsibility himself. He asked for help. He did use a few key supplements. We were working together. He was working with other people. He did it himself. If you saw the before and after pictures of him, you would not believe it's the same person. And all he did is he took that decision that I'm going to change. He asked for help. He asked for help when he was struggling, but he kept going. And now he has inspired so many other people. So none of us need to be perfect. As I said, it's so easy to compare yourself to someone that's younger, fitter, hasn't got the lifestyle you've got. It's not about that at all. It's only about yourself and what you want for yourself. And, we cannot expect others to do things we can't do ourselves. So if you're a parent, if you're a school teacher, if you're in any sort of influential role, you've got to be honest about yourself. You've got to be honest about where you're falling off the wagon. You've got to be honest about, you cannot separate physical and mental health. You can't. It's impossible. The more you start learning about that, the more you realise no wonder these poor children have got all these diagnoses. It's ridiculous. They don't stand a chance with all the chemicals pumped in with them, the lifestyle, the EMF, the constant comparison on their phones. But once you know better, once that light bulb goes off, however slowly it is, it doesn't matter. In all my years of working with animals, an animal will never say to their human, I wish you'd changed that yet months ago. Never. Right. They're just, thank you. Now let's move forward. And if we had that attitude with ourselves, not blaming ourselves, we don't know what we don't know. Life gets stressful. Things happen. But honestly, the so-called awakening audience, I honestly think this journey has done so much damage to a lot of them because they've got so obsessed by listening to other people's opinions that they've forgotten to live their own life. And, get into community events, get with like-minded people. Doesn't matter if you don't agree with everything they say, but just be around different energies, mix it up, and just to start to see how many possibilities there are there. Because if you keep yourself in a silo, that's where you're going to stay, and nothing will change.
100%. I think that a key point you mentioned there is stop comparing yourself to others.
Yeah.
I used to do that, and it's the enemy of success. For me, my attitude now, I just want to be better than I was yesterday, and that sounds really simplistic, but I'm just in competition with myself because I want to feel better, feel stronger, feel fitter, and a slight competition with my two sons as well. They're 5 and 4, and I don't want them to beat me at anything physical for at least another decade or two. So that's part of the reason I try and look after myself.
Mine did very early, and mine were both, incredibly sporty and incredibly fit. And it's great because we all need that bit of incentive, that little bit. And I'm not saying I do still compare myself. I absolutely do. But the difference is I recognise it, and I recognise how damaging it is. And it doesn't make you a nice person to be around. Use these people. Everyone's got something in them that can inspire you. Even the evil ones, it's like, look how effective they've been at mind control. If we could have that same discipline to control our minds in a healthy way, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Yeah, 100%. I just finished up another book actually, which talked about how that comparison it was all about perspective, and it was talking about two people, and it was talking about a guy who was a guitarist who got kicked out of a band. And then went and started his own band, and the band were called Megadeth, right? Went on and did really, really well. But the band he'd got kicked out of was Metallica. Because his new band never quite reached there, despite the fact they sold stadiums out around the world, made millions, all of that, he saw himself as a failure because the band he got kicked out of did better. And then the comparison was the original drummer of the Beatles, who left, obviously, got kicked out of the band after they got the record deal, replaced by Ringo Starr, never did anything really massive with music, and ended up living a pretty normal life, got married with kids and so on. But he saw his life as a great success because he looked at his life and went, well, if I'd have stayed in the Beatles, I'd have probably ended up on the same drug train that they all did. They're most of them are divorced. Most of them don't have that kind of family dynamic I have. So actually my life's great. Yet so many people would have looked at those two and gone, oh my God, you missed out on that opportunity. You must be devastated. And vice versa, would look at the other guy and go, you made millions, you sold out stadiums, you achieved everything we could have dreamed of. But the actual opinion on success or failure is so subjective, and that's what happens when you compare yourself, I think, to others. If you look in the mirror, you compare yourself to how you were yesterday, and as long as you're on the track where you feel like you're getting better and things in your life are going in the right direction, your relationship with your kids, your marriage, your health, etc., is going in the direction you want it, forget everybody else, because they're not the ones that have got to live in your head.
Completely. And this is what, imagine if we all strive for that. We're not going to be perfect at it, things will go wrong, but imagine the next generation growing up with that sort of attitude. They're going to be, if you never have a bully that's happy in themselves, ever. And most of the people trying to control us little useless eaters, they're bullies. They're bullies because they feel so inadequate themselves. And all we have to do, some of the people that I admire the most, literally over the last few years, there's a gentleman that lives near me, lives an incredibly simple life. He's just so community minded. He's really happy. He does his own thing. He doesn't get involved, but he's always there to help. And I think what we've been taught to idolize as a life we know serves no one. Show us look at what's happening with Hollywood, the music industry, as you've just said. Most of these idols are desperately screwed up. They've been abused. They've been mind controlled. They're on a trajectory to nothing. That's not the life we should be aspiring for. And you can find something positive to learn from every single person that you interact with. And if we look at people with that sort of compassion, then people will start looking at us with that compassion. And with this defensiveness that we see so much in everyone now, you can't learn if you've got your barriers up like that. If you're so set in that belief and you're so defending your position against all else, then unfortunately you're in a very vulnerable position.
Absolutely. I completely concur with that. That seems a really lovely place to finish up. Catherine, it's been a pleasure as always to talk to you.
Always love these conversations.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person finally tomorrow.
I can't wait. I can't wait to show you my guinea pigs. Horses and guinea pigs. So yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, we're working together on another exciting project that's going to come out here on Ickonic later on in the year, which we'll share more details on soon. But for today, thanks for your time, Catherine, and thank you for you tuning in and listening at home. We'll be back again next week with another health code, bringing you more information that hopefully inspires and empowers. Take care.
Thank you.